has connected with me, who has sent through questions. There has been a ton of them. They have been really, really brilliant. I will be trying to get to some of those next week. I know a lot of you have asked around the tips around what do I need to do to be a bit more cyber aware. I have got some of those coming in, so please hang in there. I will get you some. I have an amazing special guest with us today. I know that we've been talking a lot about how data enriches what you do as an organization, but that also talks a lot to what you do around being able to measure and how to monitor your marketing efforts. Now, I don't need to give any introductions to the amazing Alexandra or Ali King. She has been in the industry for a very long time, and as part of Ask Marketing, has joining me today to answer the questions around what is that data going to do. Hello, Ali. How you doing?
Hi, happy Friday, Kristof. Nice to see you.
It is a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you making the time to hop on today. And I know that we have a ton of things to go through today. There is much to be spoken about when it comes to not only measuring what you do in a marketing sense, but how that data enriches it. So give us a little bit of a sort of background. We talk about what is it that brings that top of funnel. The conversation here is around top of funnel, right? And how do we get so that we're monitoring that process through the value that we need as an organization? What are the key considerations for businesses in building brand awareness?
Good question. So we're going to tackle this in terms of brand awareness first, or do we want to talk about data at the same time?
Let's see if we can intertwine them both. I think that
Okay, I'm going to try.
Really important. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to try my best. So I think
Give it a go.
Let's tackle data first, because I think that there's lots of different types of data and they can be intertwined in so many different ways from the facet of marketing. So if we kind of break up data in terms of qualitative and quantitative data, for example, if we look at, for example, before we would kick off any strategic marketing project, we would look at a qualitative data project first. And by that, I mean a two-prong approach. The first approach being, actually attaining user research or user feedback or customer feedback in the case of a service-based business to understand from the lens of a customer, if you knew then what you know now about X company, the company that we would be engaged in working with, where would you have gone to find them? Who would you have spoken to about them? What would you have searched into Google? Would you have even used Google? Would you have checked them out on social media? If so, what channels? What content would you have been open to reading? What would have been some key factors in your decision-making process? So these are really good types of qualitative first-party customer data that can really help to inform the personas that you want to go after, and most importantly, how you can replicate any whale client that you already have now and attain another one. And then on the other side of the fence, it's actually on the same side of the fence, also qualitative. It's actually undertaking a little bit of a competitor analysis from a data perspective. And that would entail, again, from the viewpoint of digital marketing, looking at your key direct and indirect competitors and see what they're doing also from a marketing lens to understand what channels they're playing on, what is the key topic of interest that they're trying to own in their industry, who are the key thought leaders behind that business, what channels are they using, what topics are they talking about, do they have long form pieces of content, do they utilize podcasts, are they doing LinkedIn lives, all of these kind of things that you can do and things that we look to research from a qualitative data perspective before we make recommendations to an organization from a strategic marketing perspective are going to be really useful. And it's often the case that when you're brought into a business as a kind of a fractional CMO or an outsourced CMO like we are, the lens that you come with is a very objective one, and things that might seem super obvious to you inside the business, as you would know, Kristof, then you speak to somebody who's outside the business who comes with really fresh eyes. That's actually what your potential customers are seeing. You're too in it a lot of the time. So I think data from a qualitative perspective is much more, it's very underrated, I would say.
Yeah, it's totally, I have to agree with you. The thing we obviously find is that this quality data can live in so many different locations, right? I mean, we can see it in your CRMs, you can see it in your marketing, you can see it in your email, EDMs, etc. All of that is so prevalent, right? We're seeing that. So when we start to talk about data, and obviously it's siloed in environments, there's a big question that we have is around how do you automate connection, right? To be able to grow that. So how do we really bring all this together? Because there is so many ways, tools, mediums, methods, goodness, it makes my head spin.
It's a really, really good question. And I guess I'm going to answer it first by saying what the due diligence and what the kind of research behind this is. And then I'll explain a particular, like a tool or a consideration in choosing a tool, I should say. The first thing is, and using the information that I just provided around who your target market is and who your ideal whale client is to replicate, getting really, really clear on who you actually want to be connecting with at the top of the funnel. And let's use making connections on LinkedIn. Let's use that as our example today.
Right.
So to build brand awareness at the top of the funnel, the first step would be to get extremely clear on who it is, who out there from an industry, a demographic, a location, a speciality, a seniority, a job title. All of these are really great examples of who you want to start building relationships with at the top of the funnel. Getting really clear on that. It's best to be as specific as possible and do this in a really pointed way. The second thing is to note that at the top of the funnel from a brand awareness perspective, particularly, in a service-based business, this is where you can really rely on your own personal brand. So as opposed to me always saying, oh, Ask Marketing can do this, Ask Marketing can do that, I'm the founder of this business, blah, blah, blah. It's actually so much deeper than that. It's really about also being, once you're clear on who you want to build connections with, it's realizing the value that you can bring to those people from a personal and a professional brand perspective, because that's inevitably and naturally how true connections are formed, as opposed to about the transaction or about the service offering. So they would be the two, again, key data points that I would focus on before you do it. And then finding a tool, and I know we probably don't want to give names as to specific tools, do we, Kristof, today?
No, I mean, if they want to learn more about it, they can reach out to us, right?
Yeah, I think, there's a few specific tools that we have used and tried, and I'd be happy to kind of take this offline. But there's one particular tool that's recently been launched. It's a SaaS platform, and it's very much about high quality, low volume, but it can help to automate those two things that I was talking about in terms of leveraging your personal brand and leveraging and maximizing the quality and the number of the people that you want to connect with. And it can do that in a somewhat automated way. But I think the rule here is definitely not to automate the entire process in terms of building connections and brand awareness at top of funnel, because it's extremely jarring. B, you'll piss a lot of people. Hey, Greg. B, you'll piss a lot of people off. And I was with Greg yesterday. And most importantly, it's quality over quantity here, because I know we're mainly focusing on service businesses today, and B2B in particular. But if you think about a consumer brand, you have one chance to impress somebody and to make a good impression. And if you don't do that from the outset, the trust is already gone before it was built. So, that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a very tricky topic. I think one of the conversations, I mean, you and I have had this before, is that whole data lives. For example, you just mentioned about LinkedIn, right? You've got multiple platforms. You've got TikTok, goodness, you've got X, sorry, not Twitter anymore. You've got all these feeds that you've got data coming in from, and you need to be able to visualize that so that you can then use that. I mean, obviously something like our platforms can support that, but then obviously you've got to then make those insights into actionable outcomes, right? And we're not just in marketing, but in any business aspect. And that's the best way, I guess, we then go to the next level is, we've got to then get that actionable insights to then create qualification, right? And that's probably where we start talking about. I mean, that's one of the biggest ones for me is qualifying before we go any further. So what are the sort of, ways to ensure that you're getting that qualification so that when we've got this data and these actionable insights, we can do something with it?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think if we just take one step back for 1 second, we talked a lot about qualitative metrics and qualitative data. If we now flip the coin to quantitative metrics and quantitative data, there's so many different types from a marketing perspective. Of course, you have all of the vanity style metrics and very top and middle of the funnel style metrics associated with each channel and tactic. For example, how well a post goes on LinkedIn, how successful an email marketing campaign goes, how you get the gist. But then you also have really pointed metrics that basically capture the entire workflow and the partnership between marketing and sales. And they are the metrics that when we're sitting with a board of investors or we're sitting with a senior leadership team, the only metrics that really matter to them are actually not the ones that I just spoke about, you know, the vanity metrics, the email marketing metrics, getting too in the weeds. It's the metrics that actually move the needle. So this kind of comes back into your question. If we focus on three, and let's really, my area of speciality that I'm coming from today is in a B2B and professional services marketing space. So selling to a human within an organization of your service offering. There's three kind of core metrics that I would talk to that really move the dial. The first one is lead to proposal and what that conversion rate is. The second one is proposal to a signed client. And then the overarching one is total leads to client one conversion rate. So they're the kind of three core quantitative metrics that I would be working toward. And to come back to answer your question, I think if you really focus on those three core demand generation metrics that is the methodology that we practice in our business and personally, if you look at those percentage conversion rates, let's, for example, take lead to proposal. Now, lead to proposal is the number of leads, or, you know, the demand that comes into the business, and the lead is the first point of contact that a lead has with the business. In perhaps that's a completion of a form, perhaps that's an initial coffee catch up, perhaps that's an initial Zoom, like it is in most businesses. That's the conversion rate of those people who eventuate in receiving a proposal. The length of time between those two things happening doesn't matter. There will be touch points in between. But if you say like a nice stretch goal to be aiming toward is 25%. So for every 4 leads that come into the business, qualified leads that come into the business, 25% of them will result in a proposal that you hope to then go and sign. So again, coming back to your point further, if there is quite a low percentage, let's say that it's less than 25% between the number of leads that are coming in that are actually going through to receiving a proposal from the business and actually becoming a paying client, then there's something to be said about that data, that perhaps the leads that are coming in are actually not really qualified about your service offering. Perhaps they actually haven't really understood the problem that they're trying to solve or what their future state is that they're aiming to achieve. Perhaps they misunderstood what your service offering was. Perhaps there's a multitude of different reasons. There's other factors like, what was the first impression that they got from you? If we're sitting on it, if today's the first time we've met, you've heard about my company, I've just met you, I'm trying to deeply understand the problem and the challenge that you're having within your company. I'm trying to identify the problem and understand if I can help it. If we just don't get along and I just am not a good listener or talk too much or whatever it might be, that could also be, there's actually quite there's quite interesting things that relate to the personality type of the person taking that first call that can also impact it. So again, going one step deeper in the example that you just sent in terms of pre-qualifying a lead, there's so many amazing tools. This one is not new, but it's my favorite. So if you integrate Calendly within your Zoom, for example, Calendly as well as Google Meet has just done it. Like there's all of these amazing prerequisites or pre-qualification questions that a lead, you know, the person who's booking into your, you know, your precious calendar and your time, if they don't fill out those pre-qualification questions, they don't meet with me. Like time is money and it's the most important currency to me. And so if they don't show, if the lead hasn't spent the time completing a few pre-qualification questions that I need to come to that meeting prepared so that I can offer value in that meeting, well, then they don't deserve a place in my calendar. So I think that you need to be very clear on that and make sure that you are using pre-qualification where possible.
And look, you make a good point because obviously there's tools out there that already exist, and then the like is that Microsoft even has their own in the Office 365, so you can use the Microsoft booking system. So you made a valid point though. It's problem aware and solution seeking, right? So there's a 3% of those out there ready to go, ready to enact. And of course, the internet is fantastic for the ability for you to research and find people like yourselves and us to be able to then go and engage on that solution seeking expert part. So that means it takes us to the last part, I guess, is how do you really get to that point where you do double yourself from that conversion rate that we've talked about all the way through to a paying client?
It's a really good question. And I think coming back to kind of those three metrics that I spoke about in terms of lead to proposal, proposal to sign client, and then your overall metric of total leads to sign client, really coming back to those and identifying based on what those metrics are, it's going to be very glaringly obvious which areas of your funnel you need to focus on. So are you generating enough leads in the first instance? And now for us in a professional service B2B industry that we play, it's actually not about generating leads. It's about creating demand in the first place. There's a crazy amount of difference between the two. You and I've spoken about it countless times. And that is how you can essentially build demand, because if you are always focused on leads, well, leads relies on demand being there in the first place. Obviously, politically, economically, socially, there's so many impacts that can result in all of a sudden demand not being needed for your service. So you need to proactively, as opposed to reactively, which is the lead gen approach. From a demand generation approach, you need to be proactively being a thought leader, deeply understanding the conversation that you want to own in your industry. And that also comes down to personal brand too, if you're a senior business leader or a founder as well. And getting really clear on that. And I guess to your point, making sure that always on beating heart is coming from genuine thought leadership, educational content in all forms, written, audio, visual, you name it. Like that is the one non-negotiable that can never stop, regardless of the time of the year or the day of the week. That needs to be the forefront of your marketing investment regardless. Then from a middle of funnel perspective, and again, these comes down to those metrics I spoke about. If you think of middle of funnel being, from the demand being generated through to the proposal being sent. Well, what does that look like? And again, that's the intersection of marketing and sales. That would include things like really looking at the pre-qualification process, really looking at the marketing content that's been created, again, at the top of the funnel, but how that can be infiltrated through the lead nurture process. So what content is sent to a client after the first meeting? Perhaps they're invited to a coffee. What's then sent to them after that? Are you making sure that you're connecting with these people on LinkedIn throughout the journey? What proposal software are you using? I've got one that is my absolute favorite that I could talk about for years, but really hyper personalizing that proposal journey. Again, this is so much about the intersection of marketing and sales. And then at the bottom of the funnel, potentially if you're if we're talking about retention rates or, how to win more whale clients from your existing whale clients, you can look at more traditional marketing methods like referral-based programs and getting back to basics in terms of doing some more traditional marketing, like getting out there again and having 10 coffees a week and asking your existing clients to recommend you to others and providing maybe some incentive around that. I think if you really tackle it from those three kind of core data points first, in terms of those three metrics I've been referring back to, that will give you a really good indication where you're lacking and where maybe you should start. But then regardless of that, you should always make sure that you're tackling the top of funnel thought leadership, educational, value-based content.
Yeah, look, I love the fact that you talk about sales and marketing. They need to be so joined at the hip. It's one of those engagements we've certainly seen. Look, thank you so much, Ali. I know we've got to wrap up soon. There has been a ton of people commenting. Thank you so much, Katisha. Thank you so much, Greg. There's quite a few of you there that we've put them up briefly along as they've come. If you have any questions, by all means, please feel free to comment below. Both Ali and I will be able to get to them in the coming few hours after the session. And as always, if you have any questions that you'd like us to help answer, you can contact us. The LinkedIn comments are up in the corner, so feel free to find our profiles on LinkedIn. Ali, I always like to ask, golden nugget of information or a comment that you love to leave that will leave people always thinking.
Oh my goodness.
Put you on the spot. I know. Isn't that great?
Oh.
Be prepared.
No, I feel like just good people do business with good people. And I think we could talk about tools and tactics until the cows come home, but the reality is you connect based on your personal brand and your personal connection and your personal experience, both professionally and in your life outside of work. And I think so often we forget that as business owners and business leaders. So I think, just staying true to that always. And marketing is only marketing if it's got that personalized touch the whole way through. So I think that really rings true at the beginning of the financial year when everyone's looking at targets, but staying true to yourself is probably really important at the moment.
Brilliant. No, thank you so much. We will be answering the questions that you've left after the session. So thank you everyone for those. I have seen a few of them. As always, please, love to say this, think before you click. There is a lot of scams going on, especially around tax time. I know now that you are probably seeing a lot, and they may even seem legitimate because it says ATO. The ATO will not send you links. Please be 100% aware of that. So thank you so much for your time, Ali. As always, it's great to talk to you.
Thank you, Kristof. Pleasure to be here. Have a beautiful weekend.
And until I see you all next week, thank you so much for joining another top tech tip session with myself, Kristof, and Ali this week. We will both see you soon.